Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to COASTER-net Update. We've got some interesting news out of Kings Island, where we discovered this past weekend that Vortex will officially be closing after the 2019 season. Now, Danny, I had already scheduled a trip up to Kings Island this past weekend, and I actually got to take my final rides on Vortex. And let me tell you,
as did I just a few short weeks ago. I was there on Labor Day weekend with my brother Jackson, and we kind of looked at Vortex, and I kind of winced and said, "I'm gonna ride it." Jackson did not. Now Jackson may also be going for Haunt with a few college friends, but I said, you know what? Against my better judgment, I'm going to ride it because with what Cedar Fair has been doing lately, you never know when a ride like this is going to go away. And I didn't know anything at the time, but that's exactly what I said. Standing in front of it, I winced and said, I'm going to ride it because you never know when this thing is going to go away. And lo and behold, here we are not a month later, Vortex is indeed going away.
Well, first, let me say that I think the calls to save this ride or to move this ride to another park are just not smart at this point.
No.
Vortex, a very old ride. They got it for basically nothing when they bought the Bat, and then the Bat didn't work out, so Arrow came back and built this instead. So I guess they technically paid for the Bat, right? So did they really get it for free? Did Arrow I don't know what the financials of that from 30 years ago were.
Right.
But the ride's been around a long time. Arrow loopers have been exiting this universe for quite some time. And in particular, this one I said this. I rode the ride on Friday night, and I said, the layout is pretty good. The layout is fun almost. The problem is the stupid trains are so uncomfortable. You head bang a little bit, you neck bang a little bit. And for me particular, I have a wide top. My arm is banging into the side of the car the whole ride.
Yeah.
And it's an unpleasant experience. Now, could they fix that with new Vekoma trains?
Sure.
I suppose. But why are you going to invest another $100,000 into a ride that's 30 years old already? Who knows what condition the structure is in?
Well, and it's a very old structure too. I mean, this ride was built in 1987, I think, or it was late 80s here, and is a very large ride, a very large structure. The track was made with mid 80s manufacturing techniques. It's old track. It's an old ride. It has certainly gone through plenty of cycles. We've talked about that before with other rides about service life and whatnot. But let's also remember the fact that in recent years, Vortex has not been a popular ride. Even on busy days, Vortex does not have a long line, if any line at all. I was there on Labor Day weekend again. Diamondback, Banshee, Mystic Timbers, Beast, all 35, 45 an hour sometimes waits, and Vortex is maybe 5 minutes. It takes up a large plot of land. Being an old ride, it does have a larger maintenance budget, I'm sure, and it's got declining ridership. In the Gatekeeper documentary years ago, we heard John Hildebrand say, we're looking, whenever we put in a new ride, we look at where we can take a few out and offset the costs. And in the case of Disaster Transport and Space Spiral, it was two older rides. Their maintenance costs were extremely high, and popularity and ridership was extremely low. And that gets put through the matrix of how you're entertaining the guests, right? And in this case, not to dig too much into the whole Cedar Fair financial thing, but Cedar Fair said that they would be doing this a couple years ago.
Exactly.
We've talked about this time and time and again, when they announced Volcano was going away, and then when they announced Firehawk was going away, and then all these different times that we've seen these rides come out, these older rides. Cedar Fair said that they were going to continue to remove rides. like Vortex, that are costing them a lot of money to maintain. And when you think about, I think this is a little bit of a sign here of the state of Cedar Fair right now, and it's a little bit in flux. We don't know how well they're actually doing. And Andy and I have done a lot of talking about Kings Island in particular when it comes to increases in attendance when they add major attractions, and those increases not being very high. 1% increase when Banshee was put in, 2% increase when Mystic Timbers was put in, that also included the addition of Winterfest. We had said that a Giga Coaster would not make sense if you looked at those trends. Yet here we are building a $25-30 million Giga Coaster. You've got to pay for that somehow. So perhaps if they know that the attendance may not increase the way that an investment like Orion should, they're going to preempt that by removing a few rides. And I think Firehawk and Vortex were probably both on the chopping block last year. We talked about it when they started teasing about a particular ride coming out. We talked about maybe in Vertigo, maybe Firehawk, maybe Vortex. All those rides were possibilities. I think it's very likely that both Firehawk and Vortex were labeled as rides that should be removed, and it was simply Firehawk first because that's where the ride's going.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And here you're going to save maintenance time. You're going to save maintenance staff, that they'll be able to focus on the other rides that need upkeep. And it just doesn't make sense to save this one either. And that's where I come down. That, and I said this during the Wild Mouse show. We've talked about this during the Dueling Dragon show. Let's save our energy for rides that really matter. Nobody has this. Like, if you have a great love of Vortex, you are in the minority of. You have to be
an extreme minority.
Like, you have to be, one, a Kings Island fanboy, and then two, a really older Kings Island fanboy, or have some sort of memory attached to that being your first big ride. That's a very small minority of people overall.
If you're truly upset about Vortex, it has to have some sort of sentimental value. It was your first looping coaster. It was your first big roller coaster. At the time, it held some sort of record, something along those lines. And I understand that. I mean, Andy with Raptor, myself with Manta, we understand that type of thing. However, all things considered, that's not why you would keep a ride, because a small handful of people have a sentimental attachment to it. They didn't keep Mean Streak, right? They didn't keep Hurler. They're not going to keep rides like this either.
Well, and you compare this to like a Magnum or something. Magnum has a significant historical significance. It's still a great ride according to a lot of people. So like,
and on busy days, it does have a long line.
Exactly, and you save your energy for things that actually do matter. Example: Six Flags Great America. The fans coming out and saying, no, we want to save Whizzer. This has a significant. Now, granted, what got lost there? The Arrow Looper got lost in favor of Superman. So.
Unless people cried about that.
No one was crying about Shockwave going bye-bye. There was people I think might have lined up and cheered when that happened.
Yeah, right.
With you. So in this ride, very similar to Shockwave, and it does the same things, has the same issues. So I guess the next question here then is what does this mean for that plot of land? Is because I'm assuming they're going to get another coaster down the line. Some people are pointing out the anniversary year coming up in a few years here. They are getting a Giga Coaster this year, so or maybe it's is it a Kaiga coaster, a Kings Island coaster?
I don't know.
I think it's a Kaiga coaster, Danny Miller. That's what we're calling it because it's neither a Giga nor a Hyper. It's a Kaiga. So
it's a Kaiga, Brian Bass. It's a Kaiga.
It's a Kaiga. So right off when I heard this announcement, I came right to Dive Coaster right away. That the GP love dive coasters. They're visually stunning. It's going to be right there on the midway that you can have the dive. You can do a smaller dive coaster maybe, a lot like Mako or whatever they're going to call it out in San Diego. You know, then you do you bring back a small flying coaster? Do you do a wing coaster like X-Flight? There's a whole lot of options here do you do a single rail that like we see with the Jersey Devil out at Great Adventure?
Yeah, I would think that perhaps, given the history with B&M, I would think perhaps wing coaster or flying coaster or dive coaster perhaps might be your first inclinations there. I don't know if Copperhead Strike really moves the ticker at Carowinds. Could they maybe go for a mock multi-launch? I mean, you've got Flight of Fear and Backlot, but Kings Island doesn't really have the standout launch coaster anymore. You know, back in the day, sure, Flight of Fear and Backlot, they hit their own niches, but for sure they don't have the standout launch coaster, say like a Maverick, or even along the lines of a dragster or accelerator. Not even though, and certainly not along the lines of like a Copperhead Strike and what that is for Carowinds now. So I think,
and hell, you could even theme it to Flash if it's a launch coaster.
Yes, you could, Andy. We're not getting into that right now, but you could. But again, that comes back to the whole idea of, if you're not moving the attendance ticker, does it make sense to continue to put in large rides? But pretty clearly, it seems like they're going to continue to do so at Kings Island. So, you know, throwing caution to the wind and continuing to invest in Kings Island, then maybe they will.
Yeah. So we will have to wait and see what happens here, but we do know for sure Vortex will be coming out at the end of the 2019 season. So go get your last rides in before the end of the season there, that they have a few more operating weekends here before Haunt is over.
Yep.
And it was a little bit of a hefty line. I had to wait at the bottom of the first set of stairs on Friday. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a hefty. For Vortex, that's a hefty wait.
For Vortex, that's a hefty line, yes it is.
So, as always, I am Andrew Rorschach from Chicago, Illinois.
I'm Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York.
Right on, Red Warriors.
See you guys.